I turn to this now. The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation says South Africa seeks to keep communication lines open to help mediate peace talks with Russia and Iran. Dr. Naledi Pandor is in the U.S. holding talks with different audiences on South Africa's foreign policy. Joining us now to unpack the minister's engagements in America, international relations expert Thembisa Fakude. So Fakude, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on. What do you make of the comments by South Africa, who, of course, is increasingly coming under scrutiny over its relationship with regimes like Iran, Russia, China, and so on and so forth? I mean, I remember you and I, when we were talking BRICS, we thought it was quite a progressive move to add Iran and Saudi Arabia onto that list. It seems she was questioned about this in Carnegie Hall, and they say, why would you bring an authoritarian regime into the bloc? And she says, well, I don't think they're authoritarian. I don't have that in my logbook. Are you surprised by that reaction?
No, I'm not surprised. I think South Africa has been consistent in its policy. The biggest challenge, of course, in South Africa is the ability to communicate precisely what we stand for, at least from the DELCO's perspective. There's a lot of flip-flopping and sometimes emotional responses to pertinent questions at various platforms, and one would have expected that diplomacy, whatever way you look at it, or your interpretation might be what diplomacy is. I think sometimes we fail in portraying or at least depicting our diplomatic capabilities when we communicate, particularly to international audiences. We stand our ground, and often we don't mince our words, even if sometimes it's necessary for us to, apply a bit of communication capabilities and skills. We have seen South Africa often digging its heels, especially when it comes to matters that involve Russia.
So, I mean, we under the impression it's going to the U.S., of course, to normalize relations and cooperation between the Republic of South Africa and the U.S. Do you think this would have struck the right chord?
Well, it could have. She's currently riding a very high wave, praise around the world for her stance in Gaza and South Africa's position on Gaza and ICJ, but I'm not quite sure whether this was good timing. But again, she was caught off guard in terms of questioning in the U.S. She had to answer certain questions, but I think she could have easily concentrated on what's happening in Palestine and emphasized that instead of going back to that quagmire trapping of having to justify, number one, why South Africa was seen to be supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And now the next country, which is also controversial with its treatment of women, particularly the issue of Mahsa Amini, the young girl who was killed by the police. Although the minister did express her disagreement with Iran in terms of how it treats its women, etc. But again, she was caught into that trapping of having to justify and to an extent try and, justify the positions of both Russia and Iran inadvertently in the answering of questions.
Yeah. So what factors would you say currently are shaping South Africa's relationship with Iran?
We have business relations with Iran. As you know, MTN is one of the biggest investors in Iran. Iran has also been one of our main exporters and, exporter of oil, because for some reason our refineries, we are told, were created and established specifically to deal with Iranian oil. I'm not quite sure of the scientific justification in that regard, but traditionally we've been importing a lot of oil from Iran. So our relationship is quite strong. And as you know, when the Shah of Iran was expelled in 1780, he was at some point sojourned in South Africa, seeking refuge in this country, and he was hosted by the then National Party government. So the relationship is quite deep, both pre-1980 in Iran and in this country post-1984 for South Africa. So we've got that strong, very, very strong relationship. But again, business-wise, South Africa is one of the very few or only African country that has got investment outside Africa. And in Iran, we ranked amongst the largest foreign investors in that country, and as a result, that relationship continues, and it has, of course, going to be protected and sustained as long as we continue doing business with Iran. Iran being now part of BRICS also increases the relationship that we have. So we've got Russia, Iran, and South Africa now sitting in this platform, and they will have to make sure that they protect each other one way or the other, and they protect their relationship. And BRICS seeks, of course, to have this new balance of power, imposed balance of power in global politics. And I think you are unlikely from now on to hear any of the members of BRICS speaking ill against each other. It's going to be promotion of relationship, it's going to be the protection of relationship moving forward.
Yeah. What is going to be then the result in terms of continuities and changes that we should expect from the U.S.-South Africa relationship following our continued engagement with Iran?
Well, we need to anticipate what will happen post-November this year when elections in the U.S. happens, because I think when that happens, we're going to see a new attitude, particularly from the United States. We have offended them enough, for lack of a better term, at least for the past 48 months. Not only have we been firm in terms of criticizing them and debuffing some of the advances from the U.S., particularly in terms of our relations with countries such as Russia and Iran. South Africa has been firm in that regard. South Africa has been also firm in terms of its position on Israel and Palestine conflict. So all of that has not been taken lightly by the United States. We were wary of what would have happened when AGOA was renewed, or the countries that form part of AGOA were given a second chance again to be part of AGOA. And South Africa at some point felt that, or thought that it was going to be expelled. So I think after November, we are likely to see a different relationship with the United States should, of course, Trump win. You're going to see a more transactional relationship. And I think then South Africa will have to really start doing serious politicking and show that its bulk was not as big as many expected. So you're going to see a South Africa that's more emboldened. You're going to see a South Africa that's taking politics much more seriously. And I think that relationship is going to mature. In fact, even if we don't have Trump coming into power, you are likely to see Joe Biden, if indeed is re-elected, taking a much more different position to South Africa, a position that will be much more firmer and more instructive in terms of what they expect from that relationship.
So she's going in on a more principled stance, talking about the bill that is scheduled to be discussed in the legislature, in the House of Foreign, by the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, I beg your pardon, which is going to instruct the State Department to reassess the bilateral relationship in light of South Africa's ties with, of course, all these countries. And her principled stance is that, look, if you take away this aid or this support, so to speak, or this arrangement that we have, you are literally taking away the sovereign independence, firstly, of countries like South Africa, and you are curtailing an honest reflection on policies of countries, and so you're going to cause everybody to just kind of pretend to hold a view which they may not truly believe in. It's a principled stance. Do you think the U.S. cares about that?
Well, I don't think they do, but I don't think we should have a principle stance devoid of charm offensive, and I think that's what's been lacking here. So the principle stance, but I think we are going to have a serious challenge should the United States take a different position towards South Africa. It remains one of the main economic relations, one of the countries that have got a strong economic relations with South Africa. In fact, all the BRICS countries combined will struggle to meet the economic transactions between South Africa and the United States. So it's a very important partner, whether we like it or not. They might have different and foreign politic relations and practice, but in terms of economics, we have a very strong relationship, and that relationship continues to create and sustains millions of jobs in South Africa. So we have to balance both charm and principles when it comes to dealing with the United States. And what we see at the moment, at least from what the media shows us, is a South Africa that's biting more than it can chew. South Africa that portrays itself as a superpower. South Africa that portrays itself as a country that can tackle the United States head on. And for some of us, of course, who study these things on a daily basis, we think that that's a bit too ambitious, especially when it comes to economics. I think our foreign policy ambitions and our foreign policy objectives towards the United States have to be reasonable, and they have to take into consideration the economic relations that we have with that country and the repercussions should there be, a withdrawal of any sort of economic activity or reduction of economic activity between South Africa and the United States.
Thembisa Fakude, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. International relations expert there, Thembisa Fakude, as always, helping us get a sense of that relationship of South Africa with the rest of the world.